now going to dismantle and show you how to set up the parking brake caliper, which is this unit. So here it is, still on the, or temporarily on the gearbox. It's held on with these two bolts, which are already slackened, and it just lifts off. So this is straight off the car. I haven't taken it apart and cleaned it yet, which is what I'm about to do. So I'll just take it apart on the camera and see what we can find. Now each of these pads has got a little, or in this case 2 anti-rattle springs. Now we're going to be changing all of these for new ones. I'll explain about how they get set up when I come to put it together. But I'm just actually seeing what condition this is. It should just slide off like that. These pads are about half worn. I'll also want to make sure that these pivots are free, which they are. And the other thing is that the adjusting bolts need to be free as well. And first you have to slacken off the lock nuts. That one's okay, it's undone. And the second one, like that. And now I'm just going to check that the adjusting bolt itself is free, and that one is. And so is that one. So now I'm just going to take it to the parts washer and clean off all the crud, and then we'll come back and rebuild it. So, with the magic of time lapse, here is a nicely or relatively clean caliper, and I'm just going to go through the procedure of how I would rebuild it. First thing I want to do is to put some lubricant, some spray grease on the pivots of the arms. You could actually take the arms off and then grease them, but they're held on with a split pin, so I'd have to cut the split pin off and do it all. But this one, they're free enough as it is. Similarly, I want to put grease on the threads of the adjusting bolt. So whilst we've got it apart, it's far simpler to take the bolt out, clean up the threads so it all moves nice and easy, so it makes it a piece of cake to adjust the pads, which you'll see later on is very awkward, and so you want to make life as easy as possible because access is so tight. There we are, I can do it by fingers now. Now you'll see I'm using a bent spanner. This is a special tool, or it's been modified special tool for this particular job, as I'll show later on. That not only has it got a flat ground into it, and it's been slimmed down, but also I've bent this end, and you'll see why in a minute when I come to adjust these brakes in situ. Okay, that's one. So I'm screwing the adjuster bolts right in because we're putting new pads on, and just leaving the lock nuts loose. Okay, so spin that round. So here are the new pads, and they fit onto that bit there. They slide like this and are adjusted onto the disc with your adjusting bolt. Now they also have a little anti-rattle spring fitted into them, and on top of that I'm going to use a little bit of copper slip, lubricant, which isn't a lubricant, sorry, it's an anti-seize compound. It's not a grease, and it's also, because it's got copper in it, it's high temperature, which is what you want for anything to do with brakes. And these little springs, which are a little bit fitted because these are new. All these parts are remanufactured parts. The spring fits in like that, and then I have to compress the spring as well as slide it onto the holding part like that. The idea is that as the pad wears, it'll move slowly forwards towards the disc. So it doesn't move very fast or very far, but it has to move. That's that one. Do the same with the other one. Anti-seize compound. Get the little spring in, which is going to be a little bit, doesn't want to do it. Try again. I'm trying not to get anti-seize compound onto the pad face because you don't really want that to happen. There we are, and once again clip it in at the back and then compress the spring and get it to slide on. There we go. That's all right. Okay. So now the caliper is ready to go onto the disc. Now what we've done here is I've put, this is the end of a drive shaft, it's the triax housing, the rest of the drive shaft would stick out here. Then I've put it on to bolt the disc up, so the disc is then held onto the half shaft of the gearbox, so the disc is in the right relative place when it's in the car. And you have to have this up tight so that then you can set the the parking brake clearance. So the caliper goes on with the disc, with the pads, slides over the top like that, down into place, and two large mounting bolts screw into the gearbox. Now there's another piece of information you need, which is when you don't leave the caliper can move as you up and down like that. When we come to install the cable, there's a spring that goes across here, which I'll show you when we install it in the car. And you need to set the caliper so that the spring will clear the disc. If I was to tighten up these bolts now as they are, with the caliper sitting as low as possible, when I fit the spring will actually rub on the disc. So we don't want that to happen, because not only does it make a squeaky noise, but you'll wear out the spring. So with a little bit of tension in these bolts, I'll raise the caliper up as high as it will go on the slackness on the bolts down here, such that the top edge of the pad is still contacting the disc. And that's the right position for the caliper to be in. Now I'll tighten up these bolts. These again, at the bottom of the caption you'll see the correct torque, but essentially it's pretty tight. And I'm using a nice long bar here. So there you are. I'm happy with that. Okay, now we move on to setting the clearance of the pads. So you can see I can move that forwards and backs, and it will rattle slightly in and out. So the correct setting is that you can move the arm up and down, you see, on its pivot, slightly loose, but it doesn't move in and out. That means you've got minimum clearance between the pad and the disc, but sufficient that it's not actually dragging on the disc. So if I tighten that up too much, I now can't move the arm because the pad is too tight onto the disc. So I slacken off the nut such that I can just move this up and down, but I can't, there's virtually no plating out. A little bit there. Tighten up a bit more. Now this is where my spanner with a cutout comes into hand, so I can actually get the spanner off the nut here. If that had the full bit of the spanner in, it wouldn't be able to do it. So I'm happy that you can always have it slightly slacker, like that. I'm happy that's the right position, and now we do up the lock nut whilst holding the bolt in place, position. There we are, I'm happy with that one. This other one's actually not bad. But again, holding it in place. I'll have to come around to the other side. I need to get access to the lock nut on the inner pad. And as you can see, it's awkward, and it's awkward enough even with everything off the car, off the engine assembly, and we've got it on the bench. So when it's in the car, it's even more awkward. Right, so here we go. We can move the lever up and down a little bit loose, but it doesn't move in and out. And the same with this side. Again, you can just check by if you can move the pads up and down against their spring, but can't move them in and out. That is a good way of checking that the clearance is right. So that's the parking brake caliper done, adjusted and in place.